Is annuity right for you? Well, here to talk with me about this is Dana Anspach from Sensible Money. Dana, welcome.
Thanks, Bob.
So everyone loves to talk about annuities. Some people hate them, other people love them. But I think what we need to start with is the definition of an annuity.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the root of it, an annuity is insurance. What you're insuring is your future income. So basically, you're ensuring that you won't outlive your money, which is pretty important. And it's always interesting to me that so many retirees say that one of their biggest fears is outliving their money. But when it comes to the word annuity, people tend to have these reactions that can be kind of extreme, like, oh no, I would never want to buy one of those, or why would we have that kind of reaction? You really have to understand what it is. And I think some of the confusion comes because there's so many different types of annuities, and they can come with various bells and whistles that make them work either more like a savings account or more like an investment. Ultimately, though, they are insurance. And I like to categorize them into four main categories. There's immediate annuities that you put your money in and you get lifetime income. There are fixed annuities that work a little bit more like a CD. You get a fixed rate of interest. There's indexed annuities where they're tied to something like the S&P 500 that can help determine how much you earn. And then there's variable annuities where the funds get invested in mutual fund like sub accounts. And so each one works completely differently. And then there can be riders that get attached to the annuities that appear to offer certain guarantees that don't always work the way you think. And it's confusing. No wonder people are confused.
Yeah, so I guess, and oftentimes annuities serve different purposes, right? You might have an income annuity to manage the risk of longevity, and a variable annuity to as a perhaps a supplemental retirement savings account when you're in your pre-retirement years.
Yeah, they do serve different purposes. To me, really the ultimate purpose, though, is insurance. So you are paying a mortality and expense cost inside most types of annuities in some way or another. You're either getting less of a fixed return or less of an income stream because of that mortality and expense cost. So ultimately, you're insuring something. And so you need to understand what you're insuring. With a variable annuity, for example, you can invest in these sub accounts, and oftentimes they'll come with a rider that may appear to offer a minimum guaranteed return of 6%, but it doesn't usually work the way people think. So in those cases, I like to have people picture wallet one and wallet two. And in wallet one is your real money that's going up and down depending on the performance of the underlying investments. In wallet two, that 6% bucket, it's really only an accounting entry. So they'll show this benefit based on your statement. And all it is an accounting entry that says, here's what the account would be worth if it had grown at 6% a year. And that is used in a formula that determines how much income, guaranteed income, you can draw out later. So it's not like your money's growing at 6% a year and you could cash it in like an investment account or like a CD. At wallet two, that accounting entry is not real money. And where I get frustrated with the industry is when I see people that own these products and they don't understand that, and they don't understand the distinction of what they've actually bought. And that's frustrating to see people buy them for the wrong reasons and think that they work differently than they do.
I'm often fond of saying that annuities are neither good nor bad, but there are certainly cases where they're used for the wrong situation with the wrong person. And sometimes people don't know when that is happening to them. How do you determine if this type of instrument is good for you or not?
Yeah, great question. First of all, as you know, I'm a big fan of having a financial plan. So you should have a plan first, and then you are choosing the underlying vehicles that accomplish the goals outlined in your plan. What a lot of people do is they look at an annuity and they will simply look at its expected rate of return. But ultimately, again, it's insurance. It's protecting you against a unique risk. And so if you think of retirement instead of how do I earn the highest rate of return on everything, you could think about dividing your money across these unique risks. So one of the risks is outliving your money. And so what are some of the vehicles or instruments I could use to help protect me against that risk? Not all of my money should be in the bucket that's trying to maximize returns. So changing that mindset, I think, is the first step. And then to look at how to evaluate it after, I always like to use examples. So I'm going to use the example of somebody named Doug, who is turning age 66 and retiring, and he's trying to decide whether he should put $100,000 into an immediate annuity. Now, I went to immediateannuities.com to run a quote. And, as of a few days ago, March 2021, he would get about $502 per month for life if he bought this immediate annuity. Now, one of the things, sometimes you'll see annuities frame things in terms of what's called a payout ratio. So if you look at that $502 per month for life, it's just over $6,000 a year. 6%, it's not a rate of return, right? That's not like a yield. It's not like a CD earning 6%, and then you also get your money back. It's a payout ratio. With every payment, you're getting some of your principal back as well as some interest. So number one, you can't just look at that payout ratio as your rate of return and compare it. The next thing you could do is look at what's called the internal rate of return. So in this case, if Doug were to live 30 years, his internal rate of return is 4.7%. If Doug only lived 25 years, his internal rate of return would be 3.8%. Well, that is comparable to looking at other investment options. But obviously, the longer Doug lives, the higher his internal rate of return, which comes back to what is an annuity for? Well, it helps you protect you against living long. We don't think of that as a risk, but it's helping protect that income. Once you have an idea of that rate of return, then there's other things you can look at. One of my favorites is something called coverage ratio. So cognitive decline is real. People do tend to make different types of decisions, and we need to think about how we could protect our income against ourselves. What are the things that the 75-year-old or 80-year-old us might do that aren't really logical? And so a coverage ratio is a way of looking at how much of your cash flow coming in is covered by guaranteed streams of income, like Social Security and pensions. And a lot of people don't have pensions, so an annuity is a way to create your own pension. Well, in Doug's case, we looked at coverage ratio, and if he doesn't have the annuity, Social Security is all he has, and then withdrawals from retirement account. Well, the Social Security covers 56% of his expected living expenses. With the annuity at age 71, his coverage ratio goes up to 62%. So again, that's a way of measuring an additional level of security in Doug's situation. It's not necessarily a rate of return measure, but it's measuring a different aspect of risk in retirement. He has more guaranteed income. And then two other things you can look at are, does it increase the amount of assets that you might pass along to heirs? Well, again, that's going to depend on the internal rate of return and how long you live. So if Doug lives 30 years and the internal rate of return on the annuity is 4.7% and his portfolio is likely to earn 6%, well, if Doug had not bought the annuity, then that's would have maximized his wealth a little bit. But if Doug's portfolio doesn't earn 4.7%, now the annuity has maximized his wealth. And so there's other measures that it's protecting. It's not just maximizing your wealth. It's literally protecting you against other scenarios like a prolonged period of time of market underperformance, against living extra long, and against potentially making cognitive, poor cognitive decisions as you get older. So when I look at all of those things, I think annuities do fit. I think they absolutely have a place, and I think you have to look at them in terms of all of these other factors, not just rate of return.
Yeah. So one question before I have you move on to the next topic, which is you didn't mention the phrase mortality credits, or what sometimes people refer to as the longevity bonus. And it's oftentimes the one thing that annuities provide that using a systematic withdrawal plan with risky assets doesn't necessarily provide.
Yeah, so mortality credits, I mean, all insurance, right? We're pooling risk. So we're pooling our assets or our premiums with a lot of other people, and some of us will incur that risk and some of us won't. And so in this case, the risk is actually living long, which we usually think of the risk as dying. It's a different kind of risk. So mortality credits is really a way of just saying I've pooled my risk with other people, and those of us who live the long have the highest internal rate of return on this. We have the most amount of cash flow that we get back out. So I think in general, though, people don't like this idea of benefiting at other people's death, or that if they live the longest, they get more. There's something maybe that doesn't feel right about that. So that's where I like looking at these other aspects of risk and really saying, here is a vehicle that helps protect you against those risks, and that can provide some additional security in your long-term financial plan.
Yeah, I sometimes too like to think about it, Dana, as in the sense that there are different tools for different jobs. There's a tool for managing inflation risk, and there's a tool for managing longevity risk, and they're not necessarily always the same. And I think that people having an open mind about using different tools for different risks is probably important.
Absolutely. And it's not all or nothing. So many people look at these investment choices as, should I buy an annuity or not? Well, it's not all of your money. So, one of the concepts that comes out of the retirement management advisor designation is this idea of allocating against different risks. And so you can allocate, 10 or 20% of your capital toward the risk of outliving your money, or toward the risk of cognitive decline later. And so if you're allocating toward that risk, then some of these income annuities would be the right choice.
Yeah. So what other considerations should an upcoming retiree think about?
Some other considerations are, where do you buy the annuity? Do you buy it with qualified IRA funds or with non-qualified funds? So if you were to buy it with what are called non-qualified funds, like brokerage account or savings account assets, there's something called an exclusion ratio that determines for each payment you get how much is taxable and how much isn't. If you buy it with qualified IRA money, well, you're going to have to take required minimum distributions out of that money anyway, and the annuity will satisfy the RMD requirement for that pot of money. And so I have seen in some cases significant advantages to buying it with qualified money, but it depends completely on your tax rate, your age, what other income you have, and how that other income is taxed. So I think that's an analysis that's worth looking at. You also have various riders you can attach. So, an indexed annuity is one that has complicated features like cap rate. So your return might participate in the S&P index, but with an 8% annual maximum return. And then it might have a floor. And oftentimes the long-term returns on those work out to be much like a CD, more like a fixed income type product. But you can add riders onto those that also will guarantee a payout. And sometimes those are quite attractive. So those can be worth looking at. Then you have deferred annuities. So if we're at an all-time market high and you wanted to take some of those gains and move it into an annuity that wasn't going to start paying out for 10 years, it could be a way to lock in an outcome that you're going to experience to bring in some additional safety and security into your plan. And then you have things called QLACs, qualified longevity annuity contracts, that you can buy within a 401k plan. Those don't pay out till you're later in life, usually about 85. And I find for a lot of people facing retirement today, that's a pretty long time horizon to think about. I'm going to put money in today, it's not going to pay out for a long time. And then the other option I like is something I call the backup plan. So an annuity will have the highest payout if it's for a single life. So let's say you're married and you're entering retirement and you want to have this backup plan that if one of us becomes a sole surviving spouse and our financial assets have gotten down to a predetermined level, then we will automatically consider turning some of our financial assets into a lifetime income annuity to lock in that cash flow and make sure that we're okay into our 80s, 90s, and possibly beyond. So all of those are ways to incorporate an annuity as part of a plan. And as you can see, it's a lot more complicated than just should I buy one or not.
Yeah. Well, Dana, I have to say that we could talk for hours about annuities.
We could.
And but this has been a great primer, I think, for folks because one, it gives them an unbiased, objective point of view about a tool, a product that could be important to them.
It does, absolutely. And, as a firm, we don't sell annuities. We're not compensated by the sale of annuities. So we find ourselves to be in a pretty objective place to find ways to quantify whether they're adding value or not. And in many cases, they do.
Well, thanks for sharing your knowledge and wisdom about this topic as always, Dana.
Thank you, Bob.